A colonel's solemn journey to honor a fallen brother is suddenly obstructed by raw prejudice, and the repercussions unfold with blinding speed. Colonel Alistair Vance emerged from the cab, the profound gravity of his duty settling upon his shoulders, as surely as the decorated medals adorned his chest. A symphony of airport chaos enveloped him. The low growl of idling engines, the sharp scrape of luggage wheels on concrete, and the hurried footsteps of countless passengers rushing toward unseen futures. The afternoon sun cast a brilliant, unforgiving light, yet Alistair's thoughts dwelled. In shadow, his focus drawn to the official papers clutched in his hand, the transport documents for the remains of his comrade in arms. The soldier resting in that coffin was not just a name on a list. Private First Class Leo Sullivan had been Alistair's closest confidant, a white man who saw Alistair as a brother, a bond forged in the crucible of battle and the quiet moments between. They had shared everything from rations and laughter to the stark, grim realities of war. And when Sullivan fell, fatally wounded in a sudden overseas ambush, Alistair had made a sacred vow to personally see his friend's body return to his hometown for the burial he so richly deserved. Nothing on earth would deter him from fulfilling that solemn promise. Alistair adjusted the crisp lines of his military dress uniform, the gleam of his polished shoes a stark counterpoint to the dull pavement as he strode toward the terminal entrance. His medals, each a testament to hard-won valor, caught the sun's rays, but he felt no pride, only the crushing weight of his loss. Reaching the entrance, he drew a deep, steadying breath, steeling himself for what he prayed would be an uneventful passage. Inside the terminal, the atmosphere shifted, a controlled chaos of flashing flight schedules, and the blended aroma of fresh coffee and pungent jet fuel. People flowed around him, each lost in the bubble of their own journey. Alistair's uniform drew fleeting glances, but no one offered a salute or a word of thanks, a reality that no longer surprised him. At the check-in counter, a young woman with a severely tight bun and an immaculate uniform offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ticket and ID, please." Alistair presented his papers and his military identification. "I'm here to transport a military casket," he stated, his voice quiet but firm. "Private First Class Leo Sullivan. All arrangements have been made." The woman's practiced smile vanished as she scanned the documents. Her eyes darted up to meet his, a flicker of suspicion clouding her gaze. "You're the officer in charge?" she asked, her tone betraying a hint of disbelief. "Yes, I am," Alistair affirmed, his voice a calm, level sea. He had navigated these waters before, the subtle currents of doubt that arose when people saw a black man in a position of authority. With a slight frown, she handed the papers back. "One moment, sir. I need to verify something." She leaned toward a co-worker, her whispered words inaudible, but their suspicious tone unmistakable. Both women glanced toward him before one picked up a phone, her voice a low murmur into the receiver. Alistair felt that familiar knot tighten in his gut. He knew the scent of manufactured trouble, had seen that questioning look far too many times to mistake it. Standing tall, his hands clasped behind his back, he focused on the promise he had made to Sullivan. The minutes stretched into an eternity, as passengers ebbed and flowed around him, utterly unaware of the quiet storm brewing at the counter. Soon another employee materialized, a middle-aged man whose rigid posture was matched by the scowl on his face. He approached Alistair with an air of unearned authority, his eyes raking over him from head to toe. "Colonel Vance, is it?" the man inquired, glancing at the papers in Alistair's hand as if willing them to be fraudulent. "We just need to perform a routine verification." Alistair's jaw clenched, a silent battle against the tide of frustration rising within him. "Everything is in order. All the paperwork is right there. I need to board this flight as soon as possible. The family is waiting." The man's expression remained a flat, dismissive mask. "I'm going to need to see that ID again," he demanded, as though the uniform and the medals pinned to Alistair's chest were mere costume. Without a word, Alistair complied, retrieving the ID from his pocket. The man took it with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness, scrutinizing it as if it were a cheap forgery. Each passing second felt like a calculated insult to Alistair's dignity. After a painfully long pause, the man returned the ID with an indifferent shrug. "It appears to be in order, but I'll need to call security. It's just a precaution." Alistair's heart sank. "Security? For what?" "Policy," the man replied, a tight, unpleasant smile forming on his lips. "We need to ensure everything checks out." Alistair stood his ground, a volcano of anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He saw the path they were leading him down. Despite his rank, his service, his mission, they saw only one thing: a black man making a claim they found inherently unbelievable. Minutes later, 2 security officers arrived, their body language broadcasting hostility. One, a stocky man with a shaved head, took immediate command. "What's the problem here?" The employee gestured toward Alistair. "This gentleman claims to be a colonel escorting a military casket. We need to verify his credentials." The officer gave Alistair a hard, appraising look, arms crossed over his chest. "Colonel, huh? I'll need to see your papers." Alistair extended the documents yet again, his voice perfectly even. "All the necessary paperwork is here. This is a transport of military honor." The officer flipped through the documents, his face a blank slate. "Looks official, but we're going to have to take you to secondary screening." "Secondary screening?" Alistair repeated, the disbelief sharp in his tone. "I have everything in order." The officer was unmoved. "It's just protocol, sir." Alistair knew better. This wasn't about protocol. It was about power, about putting him in what they perceived to be his place. Swallowing his pride, he nodded. "Fine." They led him through the terminal, past the curious stares of passengers and the murmurs of staff, to a small, sterile screening room hidden from public view. The air in the room was stale, thick with the scent of old cleaning chemicals. A metal table stood in the center, a cold and lonely island. "Place your belongings on the table," one officer instructed. Alistair did as he was told, methodically, unclipping his medals and laying them beside his documents. A sharp ache pierced his heart as he set down the small token Sullivan's wife had given him, a dog tag engraved with Leo's name and service number. They searched him with a cold, methodical indifference, their hands patting him down as if he were a common criminal. They even unfolded the flag he carried as if it could possibly conceal a threat. When the search was finally over, one of the officers gave a curt nod. "You're clear, Colonel?" Alistair gathered his things, reattaching the medals to his uniform with a slow, deliberate precision. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the immense weight of his contained fury. The officers offered no apology, no explanation. They simply opened the door, expecting him to leave as if the degradation had never happened. Alistair straightened his back, slipping Sullivan's dog tag safely into his pocket. Without another word, he walked out of that room, the promise to his friend burning brighter than ever in his soul. No matter the obstacle, he would get Sullivan home. As he re-entered the chaos of the terminal, his eyes found the departure board. His flight was delayed. Another hurdle, another test of his resolve, but Alistair Vance would not be stopped. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted his hat and strode toward the gate. The journey was far from over, and he had a feeling the hardest part was yet to come. Alistair sat in the waiting area, his posture ramrod straight, a stark contrast to the exhaustion pressing down on him. His military bearing was an unbreakable shield, even as a storm of frustration raged within. The overhead speakers droned on, a meaningless litany of flight updates that faded into white noise. The only sound Alistair heard was the relentless ticking of the clock in his mind, each second stolen from his mission to bring Sullivan home. He retrieved Leo's dog tag from his pocket, his thumb tracing the familiar engraved letters. The memory of their last conversation surfaced, a poignant echo of the promise he was so determined to keep. No matter how many barriers they erected, he would fulfill his duty. "Colonel Vance?" The sharp, curt voice shattered his thoughts. He looked up to find 2 security guards looming over him, the burly, shaven-headed man from before, and a wiry younger officer, his eyes glinting with an eagerness to assert his power. "You're coming with us," the older officer commanded his tone devoid of any courtesy, laced only with an undercurrent of aggression. Alistair rose slowly, his expression a mask of calm. "Is there a problem?" the officer sneered. "Routine procedure, sir. Unless you've got a reason to make things difficult." Alistair's jaw tightened, but he gave a single consenting nod. He had no time to waste on their games. "Lead the way." They guided him to a smaller security room, the fluorescent lights humming a dreary, monotonous tune above. Alistair entered first, and before he could turn, the door clicked shut behind him with a sound of finality. "All right, hands on the table," the younger officer barked, his voice sharp with unearned authority. Alistair placed his hands flat on the cold metal surface. The officers began to circle him like predators, their movements slow and calculated. This wasn't a search. It was a performance, an act of deliberate humiliation. "Spread your legs," the older one added. Alistair complied, his face an unreadable slate, though his fists were clenched at his sides. They patted him down again, this time with an invasive thoroughness, lingering on every seam of his uniform. When they reached his medals, the younger officer let out a snort, his fingers brushing against one of the highest honors. "So these make you special, huh?" Alistair didn't reply, his cold, unwavering stare meeting the officer's. The guard smirked, but was the first to look away, visibly unnerved. "This one thinks he's above the rules," the older guard grumbled as he finished the search. Alistair exhaled slowly, anchoring his temper. He had faced far worse on the battlefield. He would not break here. "You resisting, soldier?" the younger guard taunted, the word soldier dripping with sarcasm. "No," Alistair replied, the single word carrying the weight of years of practiced restraint. The guard leaned in, his breath hot and unpleasant. "Good, because we can fix that real quick." For a fleeting moment, Alistair weighed his options. He knew they were baiting him, waiting, hoping for him to react so they could justify escalating their assault. He would not give them the satisfaction. Before the tension could snap, the door swung open with startling abruptness. "Is there a problem here?" A deep, commanding voice filled the small room. All 3 men turned to see an elderly gentleman standing in the doorway. He wore civilian clothes, but his bearing was unmistakably military, the quiet authority of a veteran who had seen and survived true conflict. The older guard stiffened. "This is a security procedure, sir. Nothing for you to worry about." The veteran's eyes narrowed, taking in the entire scene in an instant. Alistair standing rigid, the guards positioned too close, their demeanor overtly aggressive. His gaze sharpened. "That man is Colonel Alistair Vance. I served with him overseas. What in the hell is the meaning of this?" The guards exchanged a nervous glance. You were just harassing a decorated officer," the veteran snapped, his voice cutting through their excuse. "I will make damn sure your supervisor hears about this." The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically, and for the first time since he had arrived, Alistair felt a flicker of relief. The veteran stepped forward, extending a hand to Alistair with a firm, respectful handshake. "Good to see you, Colonel. It's been too long." Alistair returned the handshake, his stoic expression softening. "Thank you. I appreciate it." The older guard cleared his throat awkwardly. "You're free to go, sir." Alistair gave him a final, unreadable look. He knew no apology was forthcoming, and he didn't need one. Their actions had spoken volumes. "Come on, Colonel," the veteran said, gesturing toward the door. "Let's get you out of here." As Alistair exited the room, he glanced back at the 2 guards, who stood frozen, the dawning realization on their faces that they had profoundly misjudged their man. Back in the terminal, the two soldiers walked side by side. The veteran gave him a knowing look. "They still don't make it easy for us, do they?" Alistair shook his head, his voice low. "No, they don't." The veteran clapped him on the back. "But you hang in there. Sullivan's waiting." Alistair's throat tightened, and for a moment words failed him. He gave the veteran a nod of profound gratitude and continued toward his gate. The journey was far from over, but another obstacle had been overcome. As he neared the departure area, he saw the flight board. In bold red letters, his flight status blinked, delayed. Alistair closed his eyes for a brief moment, willing the frustration away. He had come too far. Nothing would stop him now. He would carry Sullivan home, one determined step at a time. Alistair stood before the gate, the glowing red letters of the word delayed mocking his resolve. He checked his watch again, each passing. Mined in this place feeling like a deliberate personal affront. This wasn't about his inconvenience. It was about Leo Sullivan's family waiting on the other side, clinging to their grief and the hope of laying their son to rest with the honor he was due. Straightening the collar of his uniform, Alistair approached the airline desk once more, his determination a quiet fire. The attendant, a young woman lost in the screen of her tablet, barely registered his presence. "Yes?" she asked, her gaze still fixed on her device. "My flight is delayed. I require information," Alistair stated, his tone even, though a storm of frustration was building. He carefully placed the transport documents on the counter. The woman finally glanced up, her expression a flat wall of indifference. "Everyone's flight is delayed, sir. You'll just have to wait." Alistair took a slow, measured breath, the knot in his chest tightening. "This is not just any flight. I'm transporting a military casket. There are specific protocols that must be followed. Can you at least confirm the new departure time?" The attendant shrugged, her fingers lazily swiping across the screen. "Look, I don't have anything new. Check back later." Her dismissive tone was a fresh sting, but Alistair held his composure. "I need to ensure the casket is properly transferred. This is not negotiable." With an exaggerated sigh, she made eye contact, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. "Sir, I understand that you think your situation is special, but we're short-staffed. Maybe check with the cargo team if it's that important." Alistair's patience wore thin, his pulse beginning to race, but he kept his voice under strict control. "Give me the number for the cargo team." The woman tapped her screen a few times, scribbled a number on a sticky note, and slid it across the counter. "There. Have a good day." The sarcasm was a flimsy veil. Alistair took the note and walked to the nearest phone station. As he dialed, a memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp. A moment on the battlefield, Sullivan taking a bullet that was meant for him. Leo's voice echoed in his mind, "Get me home if anything happens, Alistair. Promise me that." He had promised, and no amount of bureaucratic apathy would make him break that vow. The cargo team, however, was just as unhelpful. Yeah, we know about the military transport," a gruff voice grumbled over the line. "But it's a busy day down here. We'll get to it when we get to it." Alistair gripped the receiver, his knuckles white. "This is not acceptable. I need confirmation that the casket is being handled with care and transferred properly." "Look, man," the worker said, his annoyance palpable, "unless you want to come down here yourself, there's nothing more." "I can tell you." Alistair closed his eyes, summoning every last reserve of patience. "Then tell me how to get to the cargo area." After a brief silence, the worker begrudgingly rattled off directions. Alistair hung up and strode purposefully towards the restricted section of the airport. He was done waiting for permission. He would see this through himself. At the cargo area entrance, a security guard physically blocked his path. "You can't be here," he stated, arms folded. Alistair presented his identification, explaining the situation with clipped precision. I'm here for a military casket. I need to assure its proper transfer. The guard barely glanced at the ID. Rules are rules. You can't just waltz in. Alistair's jaw clenched. I have authorization. This is not optional. The guard leaned closer, a sneer twisting his lips. Maybe next time, bring someone who looks the part. The blatant insult sent a shock of ice through Alistair's veins, but he did not flinch. Get your supervisor, now. The guard held his gaze for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. After a tense pause, he muttered under his breath and keyed his radio. Got someone down here who thinks he's important. Alistair waited, fists clenched, the dog tag in his pocket a heavy, grounding weight, urging him forward. The supervisor, an older man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense air, arrived several agonizing minutes later. What's the issue? Alistair explained everything again, laying out the facts with military precision. The supervisor listened, his expression unreadable. When Alistair finished, the man gave a slow nod. All right, I'll let you through, but I can't have you disrupting operations. I'll stay out of your way, Alistair assured him. I just need to confirm everything is in order. The supervisor unlocked the gate, and Alistair stepped into the chaotic world of the cargo area, a cacophony of forklifts and humming machinery. He spotted it immediately. Sullivan's casket, draped in the American flag, resting on a steel platform. A wave of relief washed over him, but it was fleeting. A nearby worker was complaining loudly to another, "Can't believe we have to haul this thing around like it's something special. Just another piece of cargo, if you ask me." Alistair's hands tightened into fists, but he took a steadying breath. Confronting them would not honor Leo's memory. Instead, he walked directly to the casket and began to straighten the edges of the flag with reverent care. He whispered so low that only he and the silence could hear, "I've got you, brother." Almost. There. The sacred moment was shattered by another sharp voice. "Hey, you can't touch that." Alistair turned, his gaze meeting the man's without a trace of fear. "I'm Colonel Alistair Vance. This is my mission. Do you have a problem with that?" The man's mouth opened to argue, but something in Alistair's eyes, a fire forged in loyalty and grief, made him close it again. He muttered something unintelligible and walked away, leaving Alistair alone with his friend once more. With the cargo secure and the forms double-checked, Alistair made his way back to the terminal. As he reached the gate, his phone buzzed with a message from the airline. The flight was delayed yet again. He exhaled through his nose, the weight of the day pressing down on him, the obstacles piling one on top of the other, each one a test of his resolve. But this was never just about a journey, it was about a promise he would keep, no matter the cost. He sat down, his eyes on the flashing red sign. The world could throw all the roadblocks it wanted. He wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. The airport terminal hummed with a restless, frustrated energy as the hours crawled by, turning waiting areas into makeshift camps of weary travelers. Marcus sat in stoic silence, his mind a battlefield of exhaustion and unwavering determination. Every glance at the departure board was a fresh twist of the knot in his chest. His sacred mission to bring Sullivan home felt like a grueling ascent through layers of systemic disrespect. Just as he found a moment's quiet, a commotion erupted behind him. A crowd of passengers had gathered near the airline desk, their murmurs and gestures directed his way. Phones were suddenly out, recording. At first, Alistair ignored it. A man in uniform often drew stares, but this felt different. "Is that the guy they were hassling earlier?" someone whispered, loud enough to be heard. "A colonel, right? They dragged him off like a criminal." The whispers grew, phones held high to capture the unfolding drama. A middle-aged man with a sleek tablet stepped toward him. "Hey, sir, are you okay? We saw what happened back there with security." Alistair gave a curt nod. "I'm fine, thank you." "You don't look fine," the man countered, his eyes narrowing. "They treated you like a suspect, not a soldier. That's not right." Before Alistair could formulate a response, another passenger added, "I got it all on video. They had no reason to search you like that." Alistair shifted, uncomfortable, as more voices joined the chorus. A forest of phone lenses now pointed at him. He felt the narrative slipping from his control. Someone in the crowd muttered, "If they can do that to a decorated officer, what chance do the rest of us have?" A spark had been lit. The murmurs swelled into a wave of shared frustration. By the time Alistair reached the gate again, social media was already on fire. Clips of his encounter with security, shot from a dozen different angles, were spreading like a contagion, showing him standing with immense dignity while guards handled him with unnecessary force. His phone began to vibrate incessantly with notifications from strangers expressing their disgust. The situation was spiraling, and he knew it was only a matter of time. He was right. Within the hour, a small pack of reporters appeared, armed with cameras and microphones, swarming him at the gate. Their questions were sharp, relentless. "Colonel Vance, can you comment on the treatment you received from airport security? Do you believe this incident reflects a larger issue of discrimination against black servicemen? What message do you think this sends to other military personnel of color?" Alistair's expression remained a neutral mask, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He knew the media's power to twist words. "I have no comment," he said calmly, folding his arms. "Colonel, please," a reporter pressed, shoving a microphone closer. "The public wants to know." "No comment," he repeated, his voice firm. But they were relentless. A female journalist with a determined look asked, "How do you feel, knowing the airport staff treated you this way while you were on a mission to transport your friend's remains?" That question cut deep, threatening the dam he had built around his emotions. He clenched his jaw. "No comment," he said a final time, his voice steady but cold. While Alistair tried to distance himself from the media circus, the story continued to explode online. Hashtags like "Respect Our Heroes" and "Justice for Colonel Vance" trended globally. Protests began to form outside the airport as the news spread, crowds gathering with signs that read, "Honor all soldiers and equal treatment now." The chant, "Respect our soldiers," echoed through the terminal walls, shaking the very institution that had wronged him. Inside, airline and security staff grew visibly nervous. Management scrambled, but the crowd outside only grew louder. The mic pressure mounting. One of the reporters, sensing an opportunity, followed Alistair persistently. "Colonel, do you think the protest outside is justified? Do you believe this incident reflects systemic racism?" Alistair gave the journalist a sidelong glance. He knew any statement could become fuel for the fire. "I'm just here to bring my friend home," he said quietly. "That's all." His answer was simple, but his eyes told a deeper story of injustice and unwavering resolve. Meanwhile, airport executives held frantic emergency meetings. A growing sense of panic spread as the airport's reputation was shredded with every retweet. Management released a generic statement about reviewing the events and ensuring respect for military personnel, but it was too little, too late. The public demanded real accountability. Back at the gate, Alistair sat in silence, watching the chaos unfold, his personal mission now a public spectacle. All he wanted was to get Sullivan home. As reporters hovered, he leaned back, exhausted, but unyielding. The fight wasn't over. He would see it through, no matter how long it took, no matter how many obstacles were thrown in his path. He would carry Sullivan home with dignity, with honor, and with the unwavering determination of a soldier who never, ever backed down. The crowd's chants outside grew louder, their demand for justice resonating through the terminal glass. Passengers watched the growing protest, a visible manifestation of the outrage that had swept through social media. Alistair Reed had become a symbol, yet he sat quietly near the gate, his focus a laser beam on his mission, his calm exterior belying the storm within. Then a ripple of change began. Alistair's phone buzzed with an unexpected call. "Colonel." Vance, the deep, authoritative voice on the other end, said, "This is General Thorne. I heard about the situation." Alistair sat straighter. General Thorne was a high-ranking officer known for his fierce loyalty and no-nonsense leadership. "General," Alistair acknowledged. "Yes, sir. It's been complicated." "I can imagine," Thorne replied grimly. "We're not going to let this slide. I'm pulling some strings. Give me a little time." Minutes after the call, the airport staff began to scramble. Word had come from on high. Airline representatives now approached him with apologies that felt hollow. "Colonel Vance," one stammered, "we deeply regret the inconvenience. Please allow us to upgrade your flight and offer you access to our VIP lounge." Alistair met the man's gaze, his expression unreadable. "I don't need an upgrade. I need my flight and the casket to depart on time." The attendant hesitated, taken aback by the refusal. "Of course, sir. We're doing everything we can." Alistair gave a curt nod. He was here to honor a promise, not to accept perks. Soon more allies emerged. Lieutenant Colonel Davies, a senior officer from Alistair's old unit, arrived at the airport like a force of nature. Though retired, Davies still commanded immense respect. "Alistair," he said, clapping him on the shoulder, "heard they were giving you trouble." "It's been a day," Alistair replied with a faint smile. Davies shook, his head, anger flashing in his eyes. Unbelievable. A decorated officer on an honorable mission. He turned toward the lingering airline staff. "You'll regret every second of this." They backed away nervously as Davies pulled out his phone and began making calls, rallying support, and applying pressure. Meanwhile, a text from General Thorne appeared. "I've contacted the airline's CEO. They're fast-tracking your flight. Hang tight. We've got your 6." While Alistair appreciated the support, he remained focused. He wouldn't rest until Sullivan was home. A few minutes later, a representative from the airline's corporate office approached, his face pale. "Colonel Vance," he began, "we want to sincerely apologize. This is not how we conduct business." Alistair's silence was heavy, and the man shifted uncomfortably. "We've arranged for everything. The flight is ready for priority boarding, and the casket will be handled with the utmost care. All I want is to get my friend home," Alistair said quietly. The representative exhaled, relieved. "Of course, Colonel. The flight crew is standing by." As Alistair stood, Davies gave him a knowing look. "They're scrambling now. You made your point. You've got people watching your back." "I didn't ask." "For all this?" Alistair said. "I know," Davies replied, "but sometimes the right battles find you." He had learned long ago that not every fight was on a battlefield. As they walked to the gate, Alistair saw the protesters outside, their signs and chants a powerful, bitter-sweet sight. He turned to the gate agent, who offered a nervous smile. "The flight is ready when you are, Colonel." Alistair nodded once. "Let's get moving." With Davies by his side and the weight of Leo Sullivan's memory guiding him, Alistair stepped forward, one step closer to home, one step closer to honoring his promise. The plane touched down as the first light of dawn painted the sky, and Alistair Vance stared out the window, the exhaustion of the journey heavy on him, but his discipline unbroken. He had made it through the delays, the confrontations, and the public spectacle. Now, the final, most important step awaited: delivering his friend to his family. On the runway, the casket was carefully unloaded. Alistair stood beside it, straightening the flag one last time. "We're here, brother," he whispered. "We made it." At the gates of the small-town cemetery, Leo Sullivan's family waited, their faces etched with grief. His mother clutched a worn photograph of her son in uniform. His father, a man with silver hair and tired eyes, approached Alistair and extended a hand. "Colonel Vance," he said, his voice trembling, "thank you for bringing him home." "It was my honor, sir," Alistair replied, his grip firm but gentle. "He was my brother in every way that mattered. Mrs. Sullivan stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "He always spoke so highly of you. He said if anything ever happened, you'd bring him back." Alistair swallowed hard against the knot in his throat. "I promised him, ma'am, and I never break my promises." The cemetery was quiet, lined with American flags. Soldiers in dress uniforms stood at attention. Local residents had gathered not just to honor Sullivan, but to show their support for the man who had fought so hard to bring him home. As the somber notes of taps filled the air, Alistair stood beside the casket, his hand raised in a crisp, final salute. This was not a ceremony. It was a personal goodbye. When the service drew to a close, Alistair stepped forward to deliver a final message, his voice low and steady. Leo Sullivan was more than a soldier. He was a friend, a brother, a man of honor. On the battlefield, we relied on each other. He saved my life more times than I can count. When he fell, I promised I would bring him home. Today, I keep that promise." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Leo didn't care about the color of my skin. He cared about the man standing beside him, and that's the way it should always be." Afterwards, as people dispersed, many townspeople approached Alistair to express their gratitude, their voices filled with anger over the disrespect he had endured. "We won't forget what they did to you," one man said. "You brought him home, Colonel," a woman added, wiping away tears. "That means everything." Later that evening, at a quiet gathering at the family's home, Mrs. Sullivan pressed a folded letter into Alistair's hand. "Leo wrote this for you," she whispered. Alistair unfolded it with trembling hands. "Alistair, if you're reading this, it means you kept your promise. Thank you for getting me home, brother. I'll see you on the other side." The words hit him harder than any bullet. He folded the letter and placed it in his pocket, alongside Leo's dog tag. "I'll see you on the other side," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He had brought his brother home. He had found a measure of peace. The next morning, Alistair woke early. The mission was complete, but the events at the airport weighed on him. What happened was a reflection of something deeper, a system that treated men like him with suspicion. He knew the fight wasn't over. News of the incident had continued to spread, gaining national attention. His inbox was flooded with messages from other service members, sharing their own experiences with discrimination. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. A message from General Thorne appeared. "We're launching an official inquiry. This will not be swept under the rug." Inquiries were a start, but Alistair knew he needed to do more. He met with local veterans, and together they organized a campaign, not just for him, but for systemic change. His story became a rallying cry. The airport launched an investigation, employees were placed on leave, and the head of security resigned. The airline issued a public apology and promised new policies. The military also responded, announcing new training programs to address racial bias, inviting Alistair to help lead the initiative. "It's not going to be easy," General Thorne told him. "I've faced tougher battles," Alistair replied. One morning, a letter arrived from Mrs. Sullivan. "Thank you for bringing our boy home," she wrote. "But more than that, thank you for standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Leo would be proud of you. We all are." Alistair read the letter twice, placing it with the dog tag, a reminder of the bond and the promise. The road had been long, but he had carried Sullivan home with honor. Along the way, he had faced prejudice, but had also found allies and the strength to push forward. Leo's chapter had ended, but Alistair knew his own story was far from over. The fight for justice would continue. Gazing out the window at the new day, he was ready. He had kept his promise, and he would keep fighting for what was right. With Leo's dog tag still in his hand, Alistair whispered to himself, "We're not done yet, brother, not by a long shot." And with that he stepped forward, ready to meet whatever battles lay ahead, not as a victim, but as a soldier, a brother, and a man of unbreakable resolve.